We're live. Welcome, everybody. This is Dave Espino, and today I want to talk a little bit about making your slides slick. Your PowerPoint slides, your Google slides, we can all create slides for our presentations, right? And I want to give you a little foundational information first before we go into how to kind of get your slides really cool looking, right? So the foundation of creating a good course, in my opinion, is that we're having a conversation with the student. We're having a casual, like a informal conversation. Sometimes, I see people teach and they feel like they have to be like a professor. They have to be really formal. They have to use big words and that kind of thing, or be formal with their wording. And you know what? There's nothing better than just talking to somebody that talks like you, and you can understand them better, and they keep it simple, right? That's why I think people like the way I teach, because I keep things super simple. I like to live simply, and I like to teach simply, right? So any preconceptions you might have about how, well, I should be more professional, I should dress up extra nice or whatever. You know what? What people really want is realness. They want transparency. They want somebody that they can relate to, right? And so I want to lay a little foundation here before we go into this. And the foundation is that a PowerPoint slide or a Google slide presentation, or however you decide to create your slides, it's really just a jumping off point, or a set of bullet points, if you will, for you having a conversation that is a guided, flowing, step-by-step conversation. Now, if you are already part of mastermind.com, then you already have access under courses I'm enrolled in. If you log in, go to courses I'm enrolled in at the top, you already have access to the 14-day training that I have in there about how to outline your course, how to outline your PowerPoint presentation, how to create your course. You also probably have access to the course blueprint secrets, which is also under courses I'm enrolled in. So check those out to get a little more full detail in terms of slides and things like that. But what I want to get across here is, think of your slides as the slides themselves are not the media, shall we say. The slides themselves are not there to wow people, okay? I feel like if we wow people with our slides, then they may be distracted from what we're trying to actually teach. So what I like to do is keep my slides super simple and use them as bullet points that I can launch off. And then what's the most important part of teaching? In my opinion, it's teaching with stories and teaching with examples. Okay, stories and examples are how people learn best, right? So if you think about, some of the greatest teachers in the world in history have taught using parables, which are stories, right? Why is that? Well, when you use a story, it allows the student to put themselves into the story, to live out the story, and to more fully experience the story, and therefore the lesson, and therefore the learning, right? So if we just go teach, and don't ever give examples, real world examples that we've experienced, or stories that we've experienced, or even if you don't have a story about it, find a story that relates to it and plug that in. If you don't do that, the teaching will be less effective because people are not invested in it. They're not into it, right? So be sure that whenever you're creating your PowerPoints, you use them as jumping off points for stories and real world examples as much as possible. Now, I like to tell people, when I'm doing these lives, I like to let you know, hey, as I'm speaking, as I'm, let's say, riffing, shall we say, right? I'm looking in my mind like I'm searching for a story to explain something. So if I make a statement and it's a statement where I'm teaching something, I always want to bring a story to make that come to life. That's how you make your teaching come to life. So now, if we realize that stories and real world examples and real world case studies are what really invest people in your teaching, those are the like the gold, shall we say, or the juice of your teaching, then the PowerPoint slides or the slides become almost secondary, right? We want to use them to tell the story, but most of the time, the best way to tell a story is just tell the story without any embellishment, without any additional PowerPoints. So all that to give you kind of a little foundation of what I believe is the most important thing in teaching. Now let's get into a little bit about how I do create my PowerPoint slides. And by the way, I am not an expert in slides, okay? Some of you can create far better slides than I could, okay? But yet my courses are still very highly rated. My students love my courses and all that kind of thing. So I'm coming from the real world, what has really worked for me. Now, by the way, that doesn't mean that if you have a super slick, really cool PowerPoint, that it won't work for you. That doesn't mean that. I'm just telling you from my experience what has worked for me. So here's some tips and some examples of ideas I like to do to kind of flower up and dress up a PowerPoint presentation. Number one is I do this often. I did this with my copywriting course, for example. Copywriting is all about how you persuade people in print, right? And at the beginning of every video or every main topic, that I'm going to talk about, I'll have an image, just a stock photo that I buy that exemplifies what we're talking about. I'll give you a couple of examples. So in my copywriting course, I've got this concept called the slippery slide. And what the slippery slide means is when you're writing a sales page, or when you're writing a course description page, or when you're writing anything where you want to persuade, think of it as a slide, a playground slide. When you go to the top of a playground slide, well, we've all been on those slides that you get in the top and you sit down and it just won't slide. There's a lot of friction, right? It just doesn't slide for some reason. But we've also been on those slides where you get to the top and man, you just like zoom all the way down the bottom, right? Well, I have this concept that I borrowed from a gentleman named Joe Sugarman, one of the most famous copywriters in the world. And he said, the slippery slide, what you want is when people start at the top of your sales page, you want it to be so slippery that they go from this sentence to the next sentence, to the next sentence, to the next paragraph, to the next paragraph. And all of a sudden they find themselves at the bottom of the slide buying your product. And there is a way to do that. There's a way to set that up so that it's almost like a soap opera, right? You can't, or when you're binge watching a Netflix TV show or something and you can't stop watching, you have to see what happens next. Well, there's a process and a system for writing your sales copy such that it becomes a slippery slide. And at the bottom of that slide, you've answered all the objections and now they have no choice but to buy. Okay. There's an actual strategy for that. Anyway, I went to a stock photo website, and this is what I recommend. And I typed in playground slide. And I bought an image of a slide on a playground, just an empty slide on a playground. And I used that when I had the title image for the slippery slide. Okay, so my title slide, my title PowerPoint slide, we're talking about two different types of slides here. My title PowerPoint slide was labeled the slippery slide. Then I had the image there. Now, here's another example. I created a course about how to write your book fast. And in this course, I wanted to tackle the problem that people have with writer's block. They get stuck. What do I say? What do I say next? I'm stuck. I don't quite know how to get moving on my book, right? So I went to a stock photo website, again, another one, and I typed in frustration and the word computer. Okay. I found this great image. And by the way, when you do that, it's like a search engine. So you find all these images that you can choose from, right? I found the perfect image. It was a young lady at the computer. The room was dimly lit and she was like pulling her hair out. She was frustrated, right? And I used that in the title slide for how to defeat writer's block or something like, I forget what the title was, how to deal with writer's block or how to defeat writer's block. And so you can use imagery like this that helps them to get into the moment or helps them to better feel or emotionalize or invest in what you're about to talk about. So that's one thing you can do. And that's one thing you can do no matter what. And by the way, you don't have to use the whole big image on the whole PowerPoint slide either. You could also do this with the interior slides of your presentation. Find images that relate to the emotion that you're talking about in that presentation, right? So that's one thing, stock images. Another thing is pulling data, statistics, graphs, graphics off the internet. Now, what you ideally want to do is use commercial commons imagery, or what you can do is you can go to Google and you can search, and you can search by not commercial commons, Creative Commons. Search images that are freely, you're able to freely use them without any copyright infringement and that kind of thing. And you can search that way in Google Images by searching by only Creative Commons images. Or again, you could go to a stock photo site and do that. Now, there is some leeway too for using imagery in a course if it's what falls under fair use. So what you want to do is look up the term fair use for copyrighted imagery, copyrighted works, and things like that. There is some leeway in the copyright laws for us to be able to use these things in limited fashion in educational situations or for educational purposes. So there's that. The other thing I like to use is there's a tool called bubble.us, and it's spelled B-U-B-B-L, BUBBL.us. It's basically a mind mapping software tool that's online, and you can try it for free. And it allows you to create these little graphics where you can create mind maps or flow charts or things like that. You could even do that within PowerPoint if you know how to do it. I don't, so I don't use that. And so you could use graphics, charts, you could use statistics, grab imagery off the internet, that kind of thing. If you're quoting from a website, I like to sometimes just take the screenshot of just that section that I'm quoting and pop that in there. Anything to build some visual interest, right? But once again, back to our foundation that we were talking about, we don't want the slides to overtake your stories, your examples, your real world case studies, right? We don't want the slides to be so amazing that people are just enthralled with that and they're not paying attention to what you're saying. So always keep that in mind. Your priority should be what you're saying and how you're teaching and how you're getting people invested in the learning. And the slides should be secondary, frankly, in my opinion, to that, right? Ultimately, teaching, in my opinion, is a relationship between you and your student. And it's a relationship where you're encouraging them, you're guiding them, you're leading them. And if anything like distracts from that, then it starts to pull away from really good sound teaching. So it's interesting because a long time ago, I was in my, I was probably in my early 30s. I used to teach for a financial services company. And I'd have a room full of like 50 students. They were trying to get their securities license, that is to become a registered representative, sell mutual funds, retirement plans, and things like that. And as I was teaching, I had zero tolerance for students talking or cracking jokes in the back or whatever. And it was always in the back. It was always in the back right to where I was. So it was always this section for some reason. I noticed an interesting thing about teaching in the real world is certain people sat in certain places all the time. No matter if it was a new group of students, another group of students, the same people sat in the same places. For example, I'm getting off track, but this is interesting. The really studious, like straight A, I've got to get this right, those students usually sat in the second row center. And then I had students that were always very stressed out, very nervous, very anxious. Those usually sat in the front row. And then I had, I'm trying to remember now all of them, but we had the wisecrackers that always sat, like I said, in the far back to the right. And then we had like really studious students that usually sat in the center aisle, near the center aisle, that kind of thing. And we had like jokers that would sit, not jokers, but I mean, these were people that were tracking with you, but they were also willing to crack little jokes here and there in a good way. That were sitting like front and to my left and so on. But anyway, got off track there, but it was interesting how psychographically certain people sat in certain places in the classroom. Anyway, let's go back to to PowerPoints. And so do everything you can. Like the goal is not to, again, to make something cinematic or incredible. If you have that talent, absolutely use it, right? Go ahead and do it. I mean, I wish I had that kind of talent to make a slide presentation, you know, fade in and fade out and zoom in and zoom out and all this stuff. That's an amazing talent, and you should definitely use it if you have that talent. But what I'm saying is you don't have to do that in order to be a great teacher. The teaching is what comes from you. It's not what comes from your PowerPoint slides. So often you'll see me, even if you look at that 14-day training that I did in mastermind.com, go look at that and you'll see, gosh, Dave didn't even put any images in this. Partly it's because I was in a hurry to build it, right? But partly because it's about the teaching. It's about what you're conveying and the stories that you're giving people so they can be invested. So that's what I got for you. I hope that was helpful. Now here, listen carefully, because the temptation here is to go, oh, there's another thing I got to get really good at. There's another thing I got to learn. All this technology, tech, slides, blah, blah, blah. Now I got to go take a course on how to create incredible slides. No, you don't. That's my story. That's my message, is you don't have to do that. Use your story, your real world examples, your case studies, or borrowed stories. That's where the juice is. That's where the gold is. And that's where people are going to get the most value from your course. Okay. Use your slides as a guide, as a flow mechanism, as a point by point by point thing that you're covering. Notice I went off track and I started talking about the old days of me teaching, you know, face to face, because I didn't have a slide presentation. There's a good example, right? So, so use that as your jumping off point. Use that as a bullet point list. In fact, sometimes what I'll do is when I'm teaching here, sometimes I'll have a PowerPoint right in front of me. You can't see it because I'm not sharing my screen, but I'll just have one page of a PowerPoint that has like the 3 or the 5 points that I want to cover in order. And that helps me to just stay on track and speak to the camera very naturally. And then I look down, I see, okay, point number 2 is this, and I start talking about that, right? So you could even use a PowerPoint if you want to do a face-to-camera video. And obviously in that case, you're not going to dress it up or anything. You're just using it as a little bullet point list to know what you're going to cover next and in what order and that kind of thing. So hope that was helpful for you. And I hope that gave you a little bit more confidence to get this thing going and get your courses done. We're here for you. We're here to support you. So I'm very grateful to be able to do this for you and share with you all the stuff that we've got here and all the great things that are happening in the online course world. In the last few weeks, I guess you could say in the last month, I've launched 2 courses that have done incredibly well. And I don't want to give numbers because I don't remember the exact numbers, but it was definitely tens of thousands of dollars worth of sales. And my goal is to help you to get those same kind of results, or to help you to at least know what it takes to get those kinds of results. Obviously, your results may vary. That's a disclaimer we got to give all the time, right? But that's my goal, is to just give you as much of what I've learned about this online course business as possible, so you can be successful and you can be excited and you can live the life that you were meant to live. A life of impact, a life of helping people, serving people, and getting compensated well for doing that. All right, that's enough for me. I probably said more than enough. Hope you all have a great weekend. I'm wishing you a great weekend.